Jake Mitchell had always lived by one rule: mind your own and let others be. His farm, passed down through generations, was more than a job. It was part of his family's legacy and a symbol of everything his ancestors built with grit and pride. Each day started the same: golden fields glistening under the sun, the fresh smell of dirt, and the steady rhythm of his animals. That kind of peace is what Jake lived for. But that calm was about to get wrecked by something worse than bad weather: Karen Whitmore. Karen had crowned herself queen of the HOA from the nearby suburb that popped up 5 years back. She carried herself like she ran the world, addicted to rules, obsessed with order, and allergic to anything that didn't look like it came out of a magazine. Lately, her new target was Jake's land, just outside her jurisdiction. His barn, his animals, even his gravel driveway offended her perfect little view. When Karen first showed up at Jake's place, she had the vibe of someone who took things way too personally. In a spotless beige pantsuit and a clipboard clutched tight, she stormed up to his porch like she'd spent her whole life forcing people to do what she wanted. Jake, sipping his morning coffee on the porch, saw her coming and couldn't help but smirk. "You must be Mr. Mitchell," she said in a stiff, polished tone, like a cold caller mid-script. Jake took a long sip, leaned back, and said, "That's me. I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Crestwood Estates Homeowners Association. I wanted to have a little chat about your property." Jake lifted a brow. "Didn't think my place had anything to do with Crestwood Estates." Karen forced a tight smile. "Well, not exactly, but your farm borders our community, and you must realize that property values are a sensitive issue." Jake placed his mug down. "Go on." And, Karen said, "We've gotten a bunch of complaints. The noise, the smell, the appearance. We like a certain image in our neighborhood, and your place might benefit from some improvements." Jake laughed under his breath. "Improvements? First off, that bright red barn is quite an eyesore. Maybe repaint it something more neutral? Or downsize. Also, there's the rooster. Some residents say it wakes them up too early. It's disruptive." Jake looked at her, unsure if she was joking. That barn had been around almost 60 years. Its red paint was iconic. And the rooster? That's just what roosters do. "So let me get this straight," he said, scratching his chin. "You want me to repaint my barn and tell a rooster to sleep in because your neighbors don't like country noise?" Karen's smile stayed, but her eyes showed she was losing patience. "Mr. Mitchell, I know change is tough, but this is really best for everyone. I'd hate to see this escalate." Jake stood, stretched out. "Well, Ms. Whitmore, thanks for dropping by, but my farm isn't under your HOA. I don't follow your rules. And near as I can tell, my animals, barn, and land aren't hurting anyone." Karen pressed her lips into a thin line. "We'll see about that," she snapped, spinning around and heading to her SUV. Jake watched her go, shaking his head. He'd wrangled stubborn livestock before, but Karen was a whole new beast. The nonsense started right after that. First came the letters, official-looking, on HOA letterhead, demanding he meet neighborhood standards, even though his land wasn't within their boundaries. Then the complaints started, calls to the county reporting violations that didn't even apply. Jake ignored most of it, but when Karen showed up again with 2 smug HOA board members in tow, he knew she wasn't letting this drop. "You again," Jake said, wiping his hands on a rag as he walked away from fixing a fence. "Mr. Mitchell," Karen said with a dramatic sigh, like this was some chore instead of a fight she picked herself. "I had hoped we could handle this reasonably, but you keep ignoring our concerns." Jake crossed his arms. "That's 'cause your concerns are nonsense." Karen pushed ahead and handed him another paper. "As per HOA regulations, not in your HOA," Jake cut in, waving the paper back at her. "As per HOA regulations," she repeated, more firmly, "any property in sight of Crestwood Estates must follow community appearance standards. We're ready to escalate, if needed." Jake chuckled and shook his head. "Lady, you're not my landlord. You've got no authority here." Karen didn't flinch, but one of the board guys, a skinny man with thick glasses, jumped in. "We've contacted the county about zoning. If your farm is in violation, you could face fines." Jake's smile faded just a bit. He was confident his farm followed every agricultural zoning rule to the letter, but he also knew that people like Karen never quit. They keep pushing, always looking for some way to cause trouble. "Do what you've got to do," he told her, stepping in closer. "But if you or anyone from your HOA steps on my land again, I'll have the sheriff out here for trespassing. That finally got to Karen. Her face twitched with irritation before she covered it up. You're making this harder than it has to be. No, Jake replied evenly. I think that's you. He turned and walked off, leaving her and her HOA buddies behind. He could practically hear her teeth grinding as she stomped off toward her car. That should have been the end. But as Jake would find out, Karen didn't handle rejection well. She saw this as a battle, and she wasn't about to lose. The first shot fired was an envelope tucked in his mailbox under cover of night. He found it early the next morning, grabbing the mail. The HOA logo sat smugly in the corner. Jake laughed. They really thought some official paper was going to rattle him. The letter inside listed a bunch of bogus violations on his farm. Exterior paint not approved. Red barn doesn't match the neighborhood style. Noise complaint. Rooster crows too early. Unauthorized animals. No goats, cows, or chickens allowed under HOA rules. Then came the kicker. Shut everything down in 7 days or face legal action. Jake burst out laughing right there on the porch, nearly spilling his coffee. The nerve of these people. He wasn't even part of their HOA. They had zero authority over his land. But seeing it all in writing told him one thing. Karen wasn't backing off. Instead of responding, Jake pinned the letter to his fridge like a trophy and got on with his day. But that was just the beginning. Next came the county inspectors. Someone, we all know who, filed a bunch of complaints about supposed health hazards on his property. For the next week, inspectors showed up nonstop. Health department, zoning, animal services. Each one came looking serious, clipboard ready, and each left scratching their head. Roger from the health department, an older guy, gave Jake a long look while checking the clean animal pens. Son, I don't know who you ticked off, but we're being sent in circles. Cleanest farm I've seen in a while. Jake chuckled. Wouldn't be a certain HOA president, would it? Roger sighed. Can't say officially. But yeah, her name's on every form. They shook hands and Roger left, grumbling about bored busybodies. But Karen wasn't done yet. Soon after, Jake started finding handwritten complaints in his mailbox. Same tone, same petty attitude. Your farm smell is hurting property values. Think of the children. Animals are distressing. Unmowed grass shows disrespect. Expect consequences. Jake had to admit, her pettiness was next level. Then it escalated. One afternoon while fixing an old section of fence, Jake heard a chainsaw fire up, not on his property, but on the HOA side. He put down his tools and walked over, suspicious. What he saw made his blood boil. Workers hired by the HOA were putting up a tall, ugly gray fence on his land. They were even cutting into his side to do it. And who was standing there with a clipboard, looking smug? Karen. Jake walked straight over, voice cold. What the hell do you think you're doing? Karen turned, all fake politeness. Oh, Mr. Mitchell, just making some neighborhood improvements. She gestured toward the fence. It'll help maintain Crestwood Estate's visual harmony. Jake pointed at the workers, who suddenly looked unsure. That fence is on my land. Karen's smile didn't budge. Well, that's up for debate. We reviewed old survey maps. We believe the property lines were drawn wrong. Since your farm touches the neighborhood, it's best to make some adjustments. Jake's fists clenched. They were trying to steal his land, openly. You think the property lines are wrong? He said, voice low. Yes, Karen answered smoothly. And until we get clarity, the project continues. Jake moved in slowly, eyes fixed on the crew. You guys have a permit for this? One of them paused, then mumbled. The HOA said everything was approved. Jake let out a sly grin. They were wrong. And if you're still here in 5 minutes, you're trespassing. That means I'm calling the sheriff, and you're the ones looking at charges. That was enough. The workers looked at each other, uneasy, and one by one began powering down their tools. They packed up fast, clearly not interested in jail time over a pushy HOA. But Karen was furious. You can't just tell them to leave, she barked. This is a community project. Jake calmly pulled out his phone and held it up for all to see, dialing. Then let's have the county settle it. Karen's face went pale. There's no need for that, she said tightly. Then I suggest you tell your crew to pack it in, Jake said, barely hiding his satisfaction. With a scowl, Karen signaled them to go. The fence plan was over before it got started. Jake wasn't done. That night, he dug through his property records and found the original survey map. He made copies. The next morning, he sent it along with a cease and desist letter to the HOA board. His message, "Step on my land again, and I'm filing trespassing charges." Karen seemed to back off, until she didn't. 1 week later, Jake woke up to find a giant for sale sign staked in his yard. It was posted by the roadside, making it look like his farm was up for grabs. Another sign underneath read, "Under negotiation, coming soon to Crestwood Estates." Jake had to hand it to them. They had nerve. Fuming, he yanked the sign out of the ground and headed back to the porch. Before he could dial the HOA office, Karen herself appeared, pretending nothing was wrong. "Morning, Mr. Mitchell," she chirped like they were best friends. "Noticed the sign, did you? Must be a little mix-up." Jake crossed his arms. "Go on." "Well," she said, grinning, "the HOA has been looking to expand. Some realtors assumed your land was part of the Crestwood project, and the sign went up early." Jake stared. "You're saying a real estate company accidentally posted a for sale sign on my land?" Karen's smile faltered. "Maybe they got ahead of themselves." Jake cut her off. "You think you can just claim my property and I won't say anything?" Karen huffed like he was being unreasonable. "We're just trying to improve the neighborhood." Jake stepped toward her. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call whoever planted that sign and tell them to stay off my land. Because if I see another one, I'm not just tearing it down. I'll sue the entire HOA for fraud." Karen turned white. "Now, Mr. Mitchell, let's not overreact." Jake held up his phone. "Or I'll bring the county in." "Your call." Karen clenched her jaw. With a frustrated sigh, she spun and stormed off. Jake watched her leave. He knew this wasn't the end. She wasn't giving up, but neither was he. Karen was stubborn. If she couldn't scare Jake with legal threats, complaints, or bold land grabs, she'd try other tricks. But she didn't realize Jake wasn't the type to roll over. He wouldn't just push back. He was going to make her regret every step. First, he got ahead of her games. He went to the county records office and pulled every file on his property: deeds, zoning laws, land use permits. He made copies and kept them ready, just in case she tried anything else shady. Then he took the offensive. He called Sheriff Tom Caldwell, a longtime friend, and explained everything. Tom had heard about the complaints, but not how far Karen had gone. "You're telling me she tried building a fence on your land and then listed it for sale?" the sheriff asked, stunned. "That's right," Jake said, "and I've got the evidence." Tom sighed. "All right. If she crosses the line again, let me know. Next time she or her people trespass, they'll hear from me directly." With support in place, Jake focused on giving Karen a taste of her own medicine. He started small. She complained about his rooster. Fine. He bought 3 more. Every morning at 5 a.m., they crowed loud enough for Crestwood Estates to hear. Then he started planting sunflowers. Karen had once said his land was ruining the neighborhood's look compared to the perfect lawns the HOA kept. So Jake doubled down. He filled the edge of his property with rows of vibrant yellow sunflowers. Now, instead of staring at farmland, the HOA had a tall wall of blooms wrecking their perfect view. But things really took a turn when Jake brought the town into it. His buddy Mason ran the local farmers market. They had an idea. Why not hold a weekly farm gathering on Jake's land? It'd be totally legit and, even better, noisy. That weekend, Jake handed out flyers. Farmers Fun Day, free entry, come meet the animals, enjoy fresh produce, and support local farmers. The crowd was huge. Dozens of families came by, kids running wild with goats, adults buying fresh goods, and even some musicians played live country music. Karen was horrified. As expected, she stormed over, furious. "This is completely unacceptable," she screeched, waving her clipboard like a sword. "You can't just turn your farm into a public spectacle." Jake, smiling, stood firm. "Oh, but I can. See, I checked the county laws, and my property is fully zoned for agritourism." Karen twitched. But the noise. The parking. All legal. County approved. And people love it," Jake said, motioning to the families enjoying themselves. "In fact, I might make it a weekly thing. Maybe even turn it into a full-on farmer's market." Karen looked like she might blow a fuse. She had nothing left to say, so she stomped off, muttering about the board. But Karen wasn't finished. Neither was Jake. Things got messy after that. A few days later, Jake noticed strange cars pulling up near his land. At first, he figured it was just nosy neighbors. Then he spotted a drone buzzing overhead. Karen had hired a private investigator. Jake caught the guy poking around near his fence, snapping photos. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jake shouted. The guy tried to stay calm. Just documenting a neighborhood dispute. Jake laughed. Yeah? Do it from the road. This is private property. That night, Jake received another HOA letter. A new list of issues, now including animal sanitation and zoning violations. That was it for Jake. He called his lawyer, got a cease and desist drawn up, and showed up at the next HOA board meeting. Karen was in her element, preaching to the board about community values, when Jake walked in. Everyone gasped. He didn't even live in the HOA, so he had no reason to be there. Didn't matter. He walked to the front, dropped the paperwork on the table, and folded his arms. You've been harassing me, trespassing on my land, making false claims, and now you're spying on me? Jake said, his voice ringing out. Karen went crimson. That's ridiculous. Jake raised an eyebrow. Really? Because I've got footage of your PI creeping around. And this, he said, pointing to the papers, is a legal notice. If this doesn't stop, I'll sue the HOA and you for harassment, defamation, and illegal surveillance. The room went quiet. Some board members shifted uncomfortably. Clearly, not everyone supported Karen's mission. An older woman cleared her throat. Karen, maybe we should just let this go. He's not even in the HOA. Karen looked ready to burst. He's disturbing the peace. Or, Jake cut in, you're just a control freak who doesn't know when to stop. Karen looked like she might scream. But before she could, the HOA president, a quiet man named Richard, finally spoke. I think Mr. Mitchell is right, Richard said, skimming the papers. The HOA doesn't have authority over his land. And if he's lawyering up, maybe we need to rethink things. Karen stared at him. You can't be serious. Richard sighed. Karen, you've done good things here, but you're going too far. That was when things started falling apart for Karen. Within a week, half the board turned on her. Some quit to avoid legal problems. Others apologized to Jake for everything. Then came the final hit. The HOA president called an emergency vote. Sure, here's your rewritten version in American English, following all your rules, same length, no added details, reworded naturally to fit U.S. culture, no paragraph breaks, no fluff. Karen was finally booted from her role. Jake didn't have to lift a finger. Everyone in the neighborhood was over her drama. And the second she lost control, the whole HOA started crumbling. A week later, Karen slapped a for sale sign on her lawn. Word was, the same folks she used to boss around had quietly pushed her out. Jake couldn't have dreamed up a better outcome. A few months down the line, his farm biz took off, the weekend market exploded in popularity, and the HOA faded into history. Just to drive it home, he posted a fresh new sign at his property line. Welcome to Mitchell Farms. HOA free since 1923. It turned into a local landmark. Karen may have lit the fire, but Jake? He brought the heat. The showdown between him and Karen spread fast. Soon the entire town was buzzing about the feud between the stubborn farmer and the power-hungry HOA queen. What began as a personal squabble turned into small-town chaos, with Crestwood Estates stuck in the middle. But not everyone sided with Karen like she thought. At first, a few HOA diehards had her back. They were the rule sticklers. The type who'd measure your grass, tattle on kids riding bikes, and live for passive-aggressive complaint letters. They totally bought Karen's claim that Jake's farm was ruining their perfect little suburb. These people figured their home values mattered more than Jake's land rights, and that he should just sell and let the HOA grow. Then there were the fence sitters. The ones who just wanted to barbecue in peace without getting fined for smoke. They had no beef with Jake or his farm. It had always been there. His land, his business. These folks watched it all go down like it was the latest neighborhood soap opera. Karen's tantrums, Jake's savage clapbacks, and the ridiculousness of it all. They didn't care who won, but they were definitely entertained. Then came Jake's surprise supporters, the HOA rebels. These were the folks who'd suffered under Karen's reign for years, quietly stewing but too scared to fight back. They'd been fined for everything. Mailboxes an inch too tall, Christmas lights up too long, even kids' chalk drawings. Karen made their lives miserable, and Jake became their symbol of resistance. The first to reach out was Linda Matthews, who'd lived in Crestwood since day one. She used to be on the board before Karen pushed her out. One day, she strolled onto Jake's land with a homemade apple pie and a knowing look. You don't know it yet, Jake, but you're doing God's work, she said, handing over the pie. Jake arched a brow. Didn't think HOA types were into pie gifting. Linda chuckled. Oh, please. We're not all nuts. You think I enjoy getting fined because my grandkids drew hopscotch on the driveway? She rolled her eyes. I want Karen out. And I'm not alone. She wasn't kidding. In the days that followed, more neighbors showed up, backing Jake quietly. They couldn't speak up yet. Karen still had clout, but they started feeding him info. That's when Jake learned Karen had been making up complaints. One rebel, Greg, a retired vet, dropped by one night with a folder and a grin. You're gonna love this, he said, sliding it over. Inside were HOA email printouts. Karen had been submitting fake complaints under aliases, Greg explained. She knew if everything came from the HOA, the county wouldn't care. So she invented names to flood the system. Jake gave a low whistle. That's gutsy. Greg nodded. Oh, there's more. She tried pushing a special assessment, a one-time fee from every homeowner. She wanted to use HOA funds to go after you legally. Jake laughed. She thought folks would bankroll her personal war? She sure did, Greg smirked. Didn't go well. The tide had shifted. Even the calmer board members were getting tired of her obsession. They started wondering why they were spending all this energy hassling a farmer who wasn't even part of the neighborhood. Then the town outsiders chimed in. Folks who didn't live in Crestwood but had strong opinions anyway. Small-town gossip spread like wildfire, and Jake's HOA battle became the hottest story in town. A local Facebook group exploded with posts. I don't live there, but I'm rooting for the farmer. HOAs are a nightmare. The fact that Karen tried to rope a farm into her HOA? Totally unhinged. Someone make a reality show out of this. I'd binge it in one night. Even the town diner couldn't stay out of it. A server at Maggie's Cafe started renaming dishes after the neighborhood drama. The Karen Special, a dry, flavorless chicken sandwich paired with plain, saltless fries. The Jake Burger, a stacked, fully loaded cheeseburger with extra bacon. Things escalated so much that even the local paper covered the feud, featuring quotes from neighbors. One that Jake especially liked came from an unnamed HOA board member. Look, I'm not thrilled about the farm, but if it's between hearing a rooster or another 2 years of Karen running the HOA, I'll take the rooster. Naturally, Karen wasn't happy. Her grip on control was slipping. People in the HOA who used to follow her rules were starting to tune her out. But Karen wasn't going to bow out quietly. That's when she went for her boldest move yet. Jake woke up one morning to find all the roads to his farm lined with no trespassing and private community signs. The HOA had actually tried to claim the public road as their own. Jake looked at the signs, shaking his head. This was desperate. He wasn't about to let it slide. A few calls later, a county officer showed up, clearly irritated. Not only was the HOA totally out of bounds, but the county had already had enough of Karen and her nonstop complaints. By the end of that day, the signs were gone, and Karen had an official warning for tampering with public access. That was strike 3. The HOA had had enough. The board held an emergency vote, and for the first time, Karen didn't have the numbers. That night, Jake got a text from Linda. It's happening. A few hours later, she's out. Karen had finally lost control. The next morning, her house was on the market. Word was, the same people she used to boss around had quietly pushed her out. Nobody wanted her there anymore. Jake didn't need to show up at the meeting to celebrate. He stayed on his porch, sipping coffee, listening to his roosters. Finally, peace. Karen's fall wasn't instant. It was a long, glorious unraveling that revealed just how power-hungry she'd been. She ran the HOA like a dictator, but fear-based leadership only works until people stop being afraid. Once it began, her collapse was like a dam breaking. It started at that emergency meeting. The same board members who once tiptoed around her were finally challenging her role. Richard, the HOA president, had tolerated her nonsense for years, but the feud with Jake crossed the line. That night, the community center was full. People who never attended came just to see what would unfold. Jake stayed home. He didn't need to be there. Her old allies were now asking for her removal. Let's get right to it, Richard said at the front of the room. We've had multiple formal complaints about improper use of HOA funds, unauthorized decisions, and potential legal exposure. All of it tied to Karen's personal grudge against someone who doesn't even live under our HOA. Karen sat at the head of the table, acting like she still ran the place. That's absurd, she said. Everything I've done is for the good of this community. Greg, the veteran who had leaked emails to Jake, stood up. That's garbage. You've weaponized our rules and budget to go after a guy with no connection to us. You even tried to hit us with a special fee to cover your legal mess. Voices in the room murmured in agreement. Linda, who'd been waiting for her moment, added, "And don't forget the bogus reports. The illegal fence. The time you hired someone to spy on him." Karen flushed with anger. "I don't have to sit here and listen to lies." "They're not lies," Richard cut in, lifting a thick file of evidence. "Jake Mitchell sent us a cease and desist. The county's already on our backs for abuse of authority. If we don't take action tonight, this HOA is getting hit with a lawsuit." That was the breaking point. The board voted then and there. Karen was stripped of her position as HOA enforcer. She pushed back hard, arguing, pleading, threatening lawsuits, but no one budged. With no board support, she was powerless. Her final embarrassment came when Richard handed her a written notice. "As of tonight, you no longer speak for this HOA in any way," he said. And Karen eyed. "I seriously think it's time you put that house on the market. After all you've done, no one here wants you sticking around." Karen sat stiffly, fists clenched, shaking with fury. She had lost. And for someone like her, there was no worse fate. By morning, a moving truck pulled up in front of Karen's place. Word spread fast. Not only was she leaving the neighborhood, she was leaving town. But Jake wasn't done just yet. That afternoon, he had a custom sign made and staked it right at the edge of his land, facing Crestwood Estates. The bold black letters read, "Welcome to Mitchell Farms." No HOA, no Karens, no problem. It became a local favorite. Folks from all over dropped by just to snap a picture. A week later, Karen's house hit the market. 2 weeks after that, she was gone. And just like that, the HOA Karen era came to an end. With her out of the picture, calm returned to Crestwood Estates and to Jake's land. The shift was instant and honestly kind of funny. People who used to live in fear of citations began to breathe again. Lawns once regulated by Karen's ridiculous guidelines came to life. Kids could finally ride their bikes without someone filing a report. Families weren't worried about snarky letters over trash bins being out a little too long. Jake? Life just got sweeter. The HOA, under new leadership, sent Jake a formal apology. He had it framed and hung right beside Karen's legendary C. Sanda's letter. It was poetic, and even better, they wanted to make peace. One evening, Linda and a few ex-HOA folks showed up at Jake's with a basket full of baked goods. "We figured we owed you a proper apology," Linda said, handing him a pecan pie. Jake leaned on the porch rail, smirking. "What's this? An HOA trying to say sorry? Never thought I'd see it." Linda laughed. "Well, now that Karen's not breathing down our necks, it's a different vibe." Ted, a soft-spoken guy, scratched his head. "Honestly, Jake, we never had a problem with the farm. We just didn't want to be on Karen's bad side." "Fair enough," Jake said, tasting the pie. "She sure knew how to make things miserable." Linda nodded. "But now she's gone. We were thinking clean slate? No more battles." Jake paused for a second. "Well," he said, "as long as nobody starts trying to claim my land again, I guess we're good." Everyone laughed, and the years of tension began to melt away. But karma? Karma wasn't quite finished with Karen. A few weeks later, word got around that Karen's big move didn't go as planned. She had relocated to another HOA community in a different town, hoping to claw her way back into power. What she didn't count on was that this HOA already had a queen bee, someone just as power-hungry as she was. Within a month, Karen was getting hit with the same petty rules she used to throw at others. Her lawn? Dinged for being slightly overgrown. Her car? Fined for parking too close to the curb. And the kicker? The new HOA president had zero tolerance for drama. When Karen tried to push her way into leadership, she got shut down so fast she didn't know what hit her. By the time Jake caught wind of it, Karen had already listed her new place for sale, again. Sweet, sweet payback. Meanwhile, Jake's farm was booming. With no HOA in his way, his weekend market flourished, turning into a must-visit in town. Families came from all around for the fresh produce, live music, and food. Even old HOA folks came by, happily buying eggs and veggies from the farm Karen had once tried to shut down. Jake never saw Karen again, but every now and then, while sipping his coffee on the porch, he'd glance at the sign near his land. The one that made it clear Mitchell Farms was Karen-free. And he'd smile, because in the end, karma did what karma always does.